do that at the beginning. I'll do a short presentation about 10 Capital, get everybody in the room. Maybe we'll kick that off here in just a moment, so we can bring everybody up to speed on it because not we do have a lot of new people here with us today. So let me get ready for that, and we'll be back and we'll kick off with that. Just a couple of minutes, we'll do that at the beginning. But that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's see. Okay. So we'll give it a couple more minutes, and maybe in 2 minutes we'll kick off with my presentation. I'll just explain to everybody what 10 Capital is, so we all have that in mind, and then we'll move over to Jeff's presentation as a follow-up. So uh, give it just a second more, and then we'll see. We'll kick off. Any other questions, guys, before we jump in? Okay. Well, let me do some tests on my slides. See if everybody can see them. Let's see. Everybody see that?
Yes, we're good.
Oh, all right. Well, for those who are here, let me go ahead and explain who 10 Capital is. I'll go ahead and do a quick presentation. 10 Capital started in 2009 under the name Texas Entrepreneurs Network. And at heart, we help startups and investors connect for funding. And we've been doing this since 2009. So for 17 years, we've been in this process. Originally, we started in Texas, but then expanded to the rest of the U.S. and have recently expanded into the Middle East, North Africa region and Europe as well. And what we do is we help startups and growth companies raise funding. We connect them with investors, angel, VC, family office, high net worth. We help with fundraise preparation, putting the campaign together, build diligence reports, and then we go out and we have 4 online events a month and 2 in-person events a month. But in short, we provide legwork, saving people time and money in this area. We also help form capital for the early stage ecosystem. We help high net worth individuals start family offices because they invest in emerging managers. We help VC funds find limited partners, mostly from our high net worth and family office network. And then we help angel groups find members, which we see a lot of individual angels that we think would do better is if they're part of a group than by themselves. So we're trying to just capture more capital into the program for what's there. We also have a newsletter called the 10 Capital Connect Substack. It's a newsletter that talks about how to use AI to either as a startup or investor prepare for fundraising. So if you take a picture of that QR code, you can subscribe to that. It's free. You can get a lot of great information out of it from that point of view. And then we also do we have our website, 10capital.group, where you can learn more about the events that we have and who we are. There's about 10 of us in the company, and we have been doing this since 2009. So we have a great program in place already. So with that, I'll stop sharing. And then let's start talking about the event we have here today. We've got a few more people coming in, so the room is still filling up and get June in as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us for another great event here at 10 Capital. And today we have a great presentation here to talk about, the Healthy for Living product or Healthy for Life product, Jaca. And the topic is From Sugar Crisis to Healthy for Life, the case for the Jaca rare sugar. And so what we're going to do is we have a presentation from Dr. Jeff Wulfman first, 15 minutes. We'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. Then we'll have Pete Ferrari talk about Jaca and the investment opportunity that's there for 10 minutes. And then we'll take questions for both of them afterwards. If you ever have any questions, go and put them in the chat box and we'll read them out as we go along. And then we do have time for Q&A. So with that, let me go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Wulfman. If you can go ahead and launch your slides and kick off when ready. We've got some more people here in the room, and I think we'll have a few more coming, but I think we've got a good starting point.
Great. Thanks, all. Welcome, everybody. So, yeah, let's get started. So I have been in clinical practice for almost 30 years, and in the front lines, I've not been in the research setting or disconnected from, the population, like right in the front. And I saw early on, like, what is going on? Why do we have such a burden of slowly degenerative chronic disease? diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, inflammatory conditions, and so forth. And I was a functional medicine doctor before that was even a term, and looking at what are the root causes driving a lot of these things. And one of the key pieces I found early on was because we look internationally, the disease burden in the United States versus other country versus traditional cultures, we kind of stand out and not in a good way. And one of the key drivers of that is what people are putting in their mouth, primarily in the terms of added sugars in all of its form, whether that's sucrose, glucose, high fructose corn syrup, et cetera. And I became very aware of that early on. But before we get into the details, I just want to show like we have a significant issue in this country and culture. This is a from 1950 to 2010. This is showing the number of disruptive science papers that occur in the literature over time. And you can see in social sciences, technology, medicine, physical sciences, like the number of disruptive research that actually makes it out there has drastically dwindled to almost zero. And that's not because there isn't smart people doing disruptive things. It's very hard to actually get these big changes into the public awareness. So things change slowly, but let's jump over that and use common sense and see what's going on. I think all of you know, like, America is in a severe metabolic health crisis. Like we are number whatever, 40, 50 in the world among developed countries in terms of health outcomes. And one of those big things is, we have 40 million diabetics and another 115 million people with pre-diabetes, which is like, diabetes doesn't happen at a flip of a switch. It's a gradual progression. 75% are overweight or obese, and, we're spending trillions in healthcare. And when we look at like, what are all the factors? Obviously, everything's multifactorial, but one of the big, big factors is added sugar consumption. And, it's kind of the new cigarette. The average American consumes roughly 70 grams of sugar a day. And the new dietary guidelines, thank goodness there's been some shift there because it's been a disaster in the past, is starting to actually take a look at this, which I've known frustratingly for a long time and others have well. All right, let's just look at this. Okay, in the 1800s, maybe up into the early 1900s, the average American consumed maybe 7 pounds of added sugar in an entire year. In today's world, it's well over 100 pounds of added sugar per person per year today. And that, even in just one category like soda, the average consumption is 42 gallons per year. 52 billion gallons of soda is being consumed by our population. What was once a very rare thing is actually now become a daily staple with significant implications. So where is this stuff located? I mean, if we look, it's actually primarily in a few key categories. Like this is the total added sugar consumption in food categories. Like if we look at sugar sweetened drinks is actually the number one source. The second is desserts and sweet snacks like brownies, cookies, pastries, etc. Just those two categories is like over 40% of the added sugar. And the vast majority is in ultra processed foods. And, that's starting to make its way into the awareness. Ultra processed foods, unfortunately, in this country supply almost 60% of the daily calories for people. And this is far, far, far from what our body is designed. So, if we address a few categories, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products, you can actually work on reducing the sugar burden that is plaguing the United States, but also spreading out into the world. And every time the U.S. food products and habits of eating go into other countries, their disease starts to match ours. Well, what does all this added sugar do inside the body? Well, it does a lot of different things, but one is it drives insulin resistance, which is the precursor to metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. It also is like throwing paper on a fire of inflammation. You hear this a lot, inflammaging or chronic inflammation. High added sugar intake is like putting gasoline on the fire of inflammation in the body. It just makes that even worse. It's very hard on the liver. The liver has to process all of that. And we're seeing an epidemic of fatty liver disease even in children, which I never saw at the beginning of my career, even in my short time. Like this is a drastic change. By age 8, a child has eaten more sugar than a person consumed in their entire lifetime a century ago. So, this is, if you just look at this one like data point, like, okay, soda, if someone consumes one soda a day versus a person who consumes one a month, they are twice as likely to develop obesity and type 2 diabetes. So, one of the things is like, oh, it's a genetic thing and so forth. Actually, it's not. It's so much environmental because groups in other countries, whether it's Japanese or Italians or so forth, that have a very different disease profile in terms of all the things I mentioned. If they move to areas like the United States where there is a success sugar exposure, they gradually and they take on our diet habits, they start matching the same disease profile as we have. But if they stay to their strict ways of eating before they came here, they maintain that lower disease profile. So you can't change the genes, but you can change what goes in the mouth. So this flood of added sugar in all food, you go into a standard supermarket and just walk the aisles, the added amount of added sugar in all of those pre-processed products is huge. And it contributes to a web of effects of what we see in the chronic disease burden, the high blood pressure, heart disease, fatty liver, type 2 diabetes, obesity, gout, etc., as well as pregnancy complications. So the disease burden is significant. Well, when I was start learning about this, like, okay, if this is a massive contributor to this chronic disease burden, like, what can we do about it? Let's do something about it. And, it's very hard to shift like eating behaviors and so forth, but can we shift like what's in these products and that is a more beneficial? Unfortunately, each new alternative that has come forward to, up until recently has been woefully a failure. Because what was tried was, okay, let's take something that is not sugar at all, that's either a completely artificial chemical or completely modified, try and throw it in there. It has a little sweet flavor to it and see if that helps. Well, that has not helped at all, obviously. So these alternatives either don't taste good, they don't function in terms of being able to be used in products, or there are significant safety issues. And each one that has come along, I remember when Splenda came in, it's like, oh, here, maybe this one is going to be a good alternative. Well, sure enough, Splenda started having some serious safety concerns. Or the sugar alcohols, oh, maybe this one will help. Or stevia, oh, it's plant-based, it's natural, it's awesome. Yeah, you ever like eaten a stevia sweetened cookie? It tastes pretty bad. And so, I each one of these, I was like, yes, oh no, yes, oh no, it's not going to do it because of taste, function, or safety. And just some data like erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol that's used to replace some things. Okay, it's low caloric and all that, but it ended up showing elevated cardiovascular risk and GI upset. More data has come up even just last year in the Journal of Neurology, looked at like 13,000 people who had used aspartame, which is probably the most common chemically based sweetener. And they found, wow, they have more rapid cognitive decline if they, ingest a lot of this stuff, which is like, pretty common sense because of what aspartame does. And so this is like significant problem. Okay, we have this massive intake with these huge implications for the disease, but where is a good alternative that can fill this space that actually doesn't harm the body? So, we're in this GLP-1 area. This is the class of medications, which Ozempic and all that, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, which is around how do we, get that signal to being having satiety or the feeling of being full. Well, this has exploded, obviously. There's like 12% of adults are using one of these, and a lot of the food and beverage are moving towards how do we, work within this. But one of the insights is that like if the body has the correct signaling, it can self-regulate, but it's got to have that signaling. And a lot of these other sugar alternatives don't like stimulate that. Okay, I've had enough signal. So let's look and see what this actually is. Now, Jaca, the brand, it is allulose, which is called a rare sugar. And I just want to kind of give you a basis for what that means. It is actual, it's a real sugar. It's just scarce in nature. That's why it's called rare, not because of some, chemical change. It's found in very small amounts in fruits and grains. It is not artificial. It's just uncommon when you compare it to glucose and fructose. It's not lab made. But the key pieces is the body tastes it and registers it as sugar because it is a sugar. But it has a little chemical shift in its structure so that when the body brings it in, it tastes it, but it does not convert it to fuel the same way it would like fructose or glucose or standard added sugars. So it has 90 to 95% fewer calories than you would get from the other sugar pieces. And then, the other, like the stevia example, it has, for people to use these things, it has to be taste good and be able to be used in recipes that they're used to. And this fills that piece. You can actually bake with it and put it in other recipes. And the key piece from my like medical awareness and functional medicine standpoint is okay, how does it impact like blood sugar and insulin levels and that kind of thing? Because that's, where the toxicity of high added sugar intake comes in. And so let's take a peek at that. So this is it's a sugar in terms of its structure. It tastes, cooks, and bakes like regular sugar. It engages the body's own GLP-1 response rather than having the drug come in and try and do that, which has a lot of potential side effects as well. And you don't have the metabolic cost, like 90+% fewer calories. So people with diabetes can actually use this without having to like compensate their insulin injections or whatever they're doing because it does not have that caloric impact. And the FDA is excluding it from added sugars from the nutrition facts label, which is huge because it's not realistically an added sugar. So let's just take it. This is a little bit of science stuff, but I think this really shows in one graphic like why this is a massive game changer. Mm. So the graphs on the left there show the top one is what happens to the blood sugar after someone, eats a cookie or drinks a soda or whatever that has sucrose in it. You can see there's an instant spike in blood sugar followed by a decline. And then same thing on the bottom, the insulin levels spike and then decline. But the very bottom graph, the open circles on the bottom is allulose. Same amount, same sweetness, same ingredients, but you can see the sugar level is flat and the insulin level is flat. Now, that is massive because this is like sort of, you go to the root cause of what is driving diabetes and obesity and so forth, these repeated spikes of sugar and insulin all day long, day after day, leads to progressive problems. So you get the same sweetness, but at a fraction of the metabolic load. So, in terms of like if we look at the artificial sweeteners, the sugar alcohols, which is like the erythritol and so forth, which are primarily what are used as alternatives at this point, at least in this country, but this is rapidly changing, and I think Pete's going to talk about why that is. If we look at allulose, the rare sugar that is what Jaca is that it tastes and bakes like real sugar, and only allulose and sugar do that. has 90% fewer calories. You don't have the blood sugar and the insulin spikes that you get with regular sugar. And it triggers your own internal GLP-1, which is that what Ozempic and all those are trying to do to tell the body that, okay, yeah, I've had enough. And there's no emerging safety red flags. So, what I said before, high intake of added sugars, they're massive red flags. It is the new smoking. It is the smoking of our generation. People are drowning in added sugars, particularly our children. And artificial sweeteners, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies showing the risks of artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohols as well. And Jaca has very strong safety signal. And it's not counted as an added sugar uh, on nutritional labels. So it's really the only one I found that delivers taste, function, and a clean safety signal, and the health shifts that are really important to me, and I think I'm critically important to the population. So, metabolic health is, requires a lot of things. What you take into your, mouth is very, very important. And of course, sleep and stress and recovery and so forth are important as well. And I'm also the medical director for a German frequency-based biotech company called Syntropics, which has a pulsed electromagnetic field mat to help bring more energy directly into the system, which I find is supportive as well, in combined with the dietary shifts. And you know, policy is finally, but slowly, I think one of my friends, because I was been frustrated with how slowly medicine changes over time. He's like, yeah, I think the only organization that changes slower than medicine might be the Catholic Church. So, I mean, yeah, the rate of change is, and we were talking before this call how Pete and Hall and some of the others were interacting with the folks in the Middle East, and they're like, okay, let's do it. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. And I was like, really? Wow, that must be refreshing to actually hear, like, people like, well, yeah, well, we need to do this then, because it just doesn't work this way here. But it is changing slowly. The FDA's agenda, you're starting to see this come into, they're actually, bringing what is the added sugar? Well, how many added sugars are there? Excess sugars as the primary driver of chronic illness. And so along with that is like, okay, what are alternatives? The past alternatives have failed miserably. Every study that I've looked at that looks at the artificial sweeteners and so forth, if you look at long-term outcomes, whether it's in rats or people or whatever, is abysmal. So to me, like this allulose, we finally have, the palates of people are very fixed on the sweetness right now. And so we need something that tastes like that, but doesn't wreck the body as a side effect. So we're really pointing towards this, and I feel, that, and when I look at any of these kinds of things, when I evaluate myself as a physician and thinking both personally and public health, like, and also my evaluation of, like, frequency technologies and so forth, I ask, okay, what's the mechanism? Does this work with human biology in a way that makes sense, and it leads to greater vitality and health? And two, in anything, we look at what is the risk benefit balance. Does the benefit outweigh potential risks? And I think clearly this meets that signal, that the benefit far outweighs. There's really no risk signals that have showed up at all. And then, theory is one thing, but does it actually lead to people doing better and feeling better? Because I've seen lots of, amazing, theoretical things that actually don't lead to people doing better. And I think this truly does, because it fulfills, like, one of the core drivers of chronic conditions that is, spreading globally, because these same sort of profiles are starting to already are in other, in Asia and Africa and so forth. They're starting to see, as ultra processed food and massive added sugars come into those cultures, they're seeing the same burdens go on, which has huge implications for society at large. So allulose rare sugar is one of the few innovations that answers all three of these things. And I also then look like, oh, okay, who's the best at it then? And that's how I, kind of landed on Jaca too, because, and Pete will talk about, why is this different from other allulose things and so forth. And that's, part of why I got involved. Like, all right, let's help get this where it needs to be into products and into people so that they aren't overwhelmed with this, with these challenges that have real implications for the population. So that's what I wanted to kind of fly through here, and hope that was helpful. And yeah,
That's
glad to go
great.
from
Great
there.
presentation. Yeah, wanted to give the audience a chance to ask a few questions. If you and the audience want to, just raise your hand with the react button there, and we'll give you the chance to ask your question. While people are getting ready for that, my question is, how can someone determine whether sugar is affecting their own health? What's the telltale signs there?
Yeah, well, it has, wide-ranging implications. That's not like A plus B, but it's certainly number one would be care your body sort of habitus or weight being differently than what you would like. The low fat was a complete failure and just was wrong. And so it's actually carbohydrate overload that is, and added sugar overload that is the greatest contributor to weight being different than you'd like. But it can also contribute to fatigue and sugar control issues and high blood pressure and so forth. But also inflammation, like for me personally, I mean, I'm careful in my intake, but if I do increase my added sugar intake, how it shows up for me primarily is inflammation, pain, like achy joints and sugar, swings in energy because you saw in that graph, like sugar flies up and then crashes down and flies where it's not natural. I mean, refined sugar doesn't exist in nature. We are not genetically designed to handle it. It's an artificial construct that has been brought in. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, thanks for that. Pete, what is your question?
Yeah, Dr. Wulfman, one of the first slides, and this is fascinating to me, you talked about the disruptive studies and how dramatically they've decreased over the decades. I think it's really important to look at that for a minute. Help us understand what a disruptive study is, because they are in fact critical. And we would say they've decreased, but I would say they are suppressed. I'm a little more
Oh,
cynical than you
totally.
are.
No.
So help us understand the importance of that slide is hugely relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can expand this out into, corporate capture and regulatory, mixed incentives and all of that. Like, there's a huge investment for the status quo to stay the same and those who are, doing very well with the status quo. And if, the those same entities kind of control the journals and the advertising budgets and so forth, anything that like a disruptive study that shows, we thought it was this way, but actually look at this. This looks like it's something totally different. There's a lot of suppression of that. And oh my God, that's in medicine. It's been so bad that way.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking. But that slide means so much to me because I felt that in my career and profession. But to see it, it's like across the board. Like you almost can't bring, and there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of scientists who brought forward something disruptive and it was just like squashed, retracted papers, research budgets and grants gone, careers ruined, et cetera. So it's kind of tough. So I think we have to, like, to some degree, do it ourselves. You
Yeah, I think
can't
that
wait for, the big university, whatever. It's like, hey, let's shift this.
it's yeah, just like the independent journalist is now becoming the arbiter. It's the independent consumer that's going to have to rely on himself to become healthy. And these axioms go back 60 years. This started as far back as the Sugar Research Foundation in 1965. There was a study called Project 289. The SRF did a study about the impact of either starch, which is basically carbohydrates, or sugar on weight gain. And what Project 289 found handily was that it was sugar almost primarily that contributed to weight gain. Well, the sugar lobby got a hold of that preliminary research and they jumped in and they started coercing, they started manipulating, they started bullying these Project 289 scientists. And what ended up happening was when the report was actually issued, it blamed starch and carbs. And that's when the war on fat began in that genre, not against sugar, but against carbs, against starch. And so if you look at kind of the hand holding between these different groups and these different architects of industry in this country, it's really kind of a sad tale. And we only have ourselves to count on.
Yeah, so that's a example that that was disruptive research and it was not allowed.
Exactly. Exactly.
The other piece where through my trajectory when I started learning this, like, oh, all I got to do is educate people and tell them and then that's going to lead to behavior change. That only works on a small percent of the people. Like I could give this lecture and talk about this to a group and only a small percent are going to go, oh wow, okay, I'm going to change my behavior. So to me, that's part of the importance of getting this into consumer products because a huge part of the population is going to continue to consume things that taste sweet. So let's get in something that isn't going to wreck their metabolic health that still, has some sweetness to it. Um, because I just have to do that. And then, the behavioral shifts hopefully will come in time, but we critically need to change that now.
Great.
Yeah, there is tangible data as it relates to what you just said. The healthiest culture in the world, Japan, they have a countrywide obesity rate of 3%. We're over 70. Japan uses allulose in north of 10,000 products. There is no awareness gap. They've known about this for 30 years. There's 30 years of clinical trial data behind this super sugar. They've embraced it. They use it. They've got an amazingly low obesity rate. By contrast, the International Food Information Council in this country cites that Americans, less than 15% of us have ever heard of it. Translates into a 72% obesity rate countrywide here. So to your point, getting it out there, obviating the awareness gap for us is our primary hurdle because once you taste it, it tastes like sugar. There's an aha moment, and now you'll be purchasing from then on. So it's really just the awareness component that you're describing that becomes critical.
Great. We have time for a couple of more questions. If anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and give you the opportunity. My last question is, if somebody moves from regular sugar to allulose and wants to track their health improvements, are there biomarkers or what exactly do you look at to track your progress in improving your health using allulose?
Well, one of the quickest things you could do, which would be very dramatic, they have these, consumer level continuous glucose monitors you can get now, where you
Mhm.
paste them on your arm and you got your app and so forth. You will see it right away. Where you used to go boop, boop, like this, it's like this. Your curve your glucose curve will flatten, which, and then of course over time, hopefully your weight and inflammation and energy and so forth will come along with that. But that would be a very rapid shift. But when people who truly embrace significantly dropping, like my number one, back years ago when I was clinical medicine, first lifestyle thing is, do you drink soda? Stop. Just that one change. Because we saw it's 56 gallons a year or whatever.
Wow.
And people come off blood pressure medication, reduce their diabetes meds by half, weight just with that, because you're not just flooding the system all the time. But that would be like the continuous glucose monitoring. You would see I don't spike like I used to.
Very good information. We're at this point like to switch gears a little bit, invite Pete Ferrari to talk a little bit about Healthy for Life and how that works and what they're doing to help solve this problem as well.
Wonderful. Can you all see the screen?
It's coming up, and we see it.
Perfect. Well, everybody, thank you for attending today. Dr. Wulfman, amazing. I really appreciate the insight. I learned a lot, and I tend to nerd out on this stuff. I love learning about new things and try to do a lot of research, and you still managed to teach me some things, so I appreciate it. I think it makes sense to start with the reason why I got into this business. I'm not going to spend too much time on background, but how do I find myself here, which I think on some level is relevant. And forget about the fact that I built a few tech companies in the 90s in Atlanta through to Liquidity Event. Fast forward to the 15 years prior to this business where I was a real estate developer in 4 states, including Nashville, Tennessee, a top 10 market. I'm in my mid 50s at that point. I'm doing very well as a real estate developer, tenured. My daughter's going off to college. I am preparing to enter what would most likely and conceivably be the easiest time of my life. And I was asked to be on the board of directors of another health food company. This is a company that had created a plant-based flour. And they had all these recipes that they were making with this particular flour. Now, naturally, before I could agree to be on the board and advocate their products, I needed a care package. I needed them to send me everything that they were making so that I could taste it. And naturally, everything's got flour in it. So they were sending me cakes and pies and breads and muffins and waffle mixes and pancake mixes and on and on. Everything tasted amazing. Everything tasted so good that I knew it had real sugar in it. Because if you ever had, I think Dr. Wulfman made the point, if you've ever had a stevia cookie, it tastes like shit. All of this food tasted so good, I knew it had real sugar in it because it didn't have that aftertaste like you're chewing on a bag of nickels. So I called my colleague back and I challenged him and I said, listen, I understand the claims that you're making elementally from a recipe standpoint because your flour is vegan friendly, halal, zero glycemic index, non-GMO, all that's great. However, you've clearly got sugar in these products and sugar kills more people every year than guns do. You cannot be making these claims. And he said, well, Pete, it's not sucrose, it's allulose. And immediately, like I said, I'm in my mid 50s. So at that point, I had been going to the gym for 40 years. I've seen all the fads come and go. I've never heard of allulose in my life. So he starts speaking about the merits of this sugar, diabetic friendly, keto friendly, FDA GRAS status, vegan, halal, kosher, activates GLP-1, Proposition 65 compliant. I didn't believe a word he was saying. Bells and sirens, because we've been hearing about this for 40 years. This industry has been crying wolf. Tastes like sugar, cooks like sugar, bakes like sugar. It never does. So I listened to him, got off the phone, deep dove into the actual clinical trials. And as Dr. Wulfman stated, these are legitimate, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials, the best of their kind, from reputable universities in conjunction with reputable democratic governments. Kagawa University in Japan, in association with the Japanese government. Kyungpook University in South Korea, in association with the South Korean government. Stable democracies, legitimate studies. Well, I came out the other end and I said, okay, you can have your flour and real estate development's been fun, but I've got the opportunity now to help millions of people who are struggling. As I mentioned, according to IFIC, less than 15% of Americans have ever even heard of the sugar. I've got a phenomenal opportunity here to help people. So I jumped out of the real estate business with both feet and I jumped into the sugar business head first. It's kind of how I find myself here. And it's been a great ride. And I think the big thing for me before I jumped in was very simple. There was one linchpin for the decision. What's it taste like? Because if it didn't taste like real sugar, I'd still be a real estate developer. Because again, this industry has been crying wolf since Saccharin, the pink packet, Sweet and Low came out when I was 10 or 11 years old. Tastes like sugar, cooks like sugar, never does. So it tasted like sugar emphatically. I knew I had something here. And so really the interesting component about that, and you've heard all the merits and the benefits from Dr. Wulfman, what I find myself in a position of doing every day now is trying to honor the sugar by building a formidable company around it. It sounds very weird. I'm honoring something that is inanimate, but I've tried to build this company out, the infrastructure accordingly, so that I'm doing justice by this paradigm shifting historical ingredient. And to that end, we are an infrastructure first company. There's a lot of companies out there, especially startups, that do whatever it takes to drive revenue. They get a bunch of money in a first or a second round. They start throwing money at ad dollars so that they can get revenue in. So that when somebody says, what's your revenue? They can say, we're doing 300 grand a month. We're doing 400 grand a month. That is hollow revenue. That is a shallow concept that does not provide for sustainability. I built tech companies in the 90s in Atlanta, and it was always infrastructure first. You needed to have a stable environment in the back office. You need to have a stable, outwardly facing environment for the consumer, or else you weren't going to make it in the tech space. And so we spent the better part of the last year. We launched a year ago, 2025. Our KPIs are astounding, which we'll discuss. We launched a year ago, but to that end, about honoring the sugar and being infrastructure first, we've got Oracle on the back end. Used by the Fortune 500 almost exclusively, incredibly expensive. I realized and knew early on that we needed to have a back end that could be extendable, scalable, maintainable to the nth level. And thankfully, we were chosen as one of 50 companies worldwide to participate in the NetSuite Accelerator program for Oracle. So I literally pay next to nothing. And since day one of operations, we've got Oracle on the back end. I've also had the benefit of being a part of M&A teams in the past. And almost always the driving force on the acquisition multiple was the ability to access and monetize the data on the back end. If they could get to it easily by hitting a switch, monetize that data, generate revenue from it, the multiple went up. If it was Google Docs in the background or comma delimited files, the multiple went down. So we're very fortunate to have that day one. As well, outwardly facing, we are in the top 0.4% globally, according to a McKinsey 2025 benchmark study, with what we're doing with artificial intelligence. We've got 4 AI engines out on the internet polling 24/7 by 365, capturing intent, capturing demand, capturing views, driving people to the website to buy. And the beauty of that is we're an e-com company. So I can now replicate this stabilized e-com infrastructure, this stabilized back office, these stabilized AI engines. I can replicate them anywhere in the world. So it's a very unique opportunity with a very unique sugar. The numbers don't lie. We've got 4x to 10x industry averages for all of our KPIs. And again, our ad spend versus what these other guys are doing is anemic, and we've still been able to perform like this. I attribute a lot of it to Howie Mandel. Our partnership with him has been great. He's put us on mainstream TV, 3,000 placements, streaming channel, Hulu, Peacock, HBO Max, on his podcast, which has 1 billion streams. So a lot of that has to do with Howie, but I think even more of it has to do with those AI engines that are out there looking for people who are typing in long-tailed prompts in ChatGPT. Where can I find a diabetic-friendly sugar that doesn't taste bad? Our engines are out there capturing that intent. It's not manufactured intent, which you're doing when you generate a social media ad. It's intent that already exists and lives, and we're finding it and sending people to Jaca. Half of our revenue comes from repeat purchases. Half. It's a phenomenal statistic we're incredibly proud of. 24% conversion rate. Our subscriptions have 5x in the last 4 months, so there's a huge MRR component as well. None of that would matter, right? Everything I've been saying for the last few minutes would matter if there wasn't a marketplace. So I'm happy to report that we've got a $22 billion industry globally for sugar, domestically for sugar and sweeteners, $100 billion globally. And that's largely a function of everybody not willing to give up their sweet tooth. And that gives us an opportunity worldwide, which we are seizing. To Hall's point in the intro, we're working actively in the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa. We've got a lot of interest from Saudi Arabia and Egypt, where we may be replicating these infrastructure apparatuses, as I've described, internationally. Heavy discussions are underway to capitalize on this $100 billion market. Now, what's relevant here for me is the allulose market, $450 million. It's got a 32.3% CAGR. Last year at this time, the allulose market entirely was valued at $50 million and a 10% CAGR. 2026 value, these numbers on that slide are not future projected. We have literally gone to $500 million and the CAGR has tripled. I haven't seen a 30% CAGR outside of tech, I don't think ever. So it really does give us a unique opportunity, especially when combined with the fact that less than 15% of Americans have ever heard of this sugar. In the MENA region, the awareness gap is almost 100%. Almost nobody in that region knows about this sugar, and diabetes rates in the MENA region are growing at 110%. As Hall said, 1 out of 2 people in Saudi Arabia have diabetes. That region of the world has some of the highest obesity percentages next to the United States on the globe. So it's a very unique opportunity for us. And because we're an e-com company in the way we've architected, we have the ability to seize every opportunity to be successful. We've got the trends that are following in our favor. GLP-1 is all the rage, right? Everybody's here's about Ozempic and Wegovy or whatever these terms are. It's basically just a GLP-1 activator. Well, Jaca activates the GLP-1 hormone naturally upon ingestion. Basically, and I won't get too nerdy on you, but the GLP-1 hormone sits in the intestinal tract. And there are receptors in the hypothalamus and the brainstem. So when you either inject with a shot GLP-1 or you ingest a GLP-1, it activates the hormone in the intestinal tract and it sends signals to the brain saying, hey, you know what? You're satisfied. You're full. Stop eating. That's basically the whole concept. Well, Jaca actually does that naturally. Tells you that you are satisfied. And that's why the big food and beverage companies don't want any part of it. Regular sugar, old school sugar, has been clinically proven to be 10 times more addictive than cocaine. So think about this from Coca-Cola's standpoint. And we all know it's about money. If Coca-Cola had the choice between creating a Coca-Cola product that tastes exactly like Coke, because Jaca is sugar, not Diet Coke or Coke Zero, they could create an exact replica of Coca-Cola, but you'd be satisfied after you drank 3/4 of one instead of drinking 10. Which would they rather have you drink? That's what it's all about. And that's why the awareness gap and the suppression campaign is so great in this country. And that's where we come in. And you look at the 2025 to 2030 guidelines, as Dr. Wulfman said, that they have come out and said that no amount of sugar or non-nutritive sweetener should find its way into a healthy diet. So no amount of sugar and no amount of everything else, that's a non-nutritive sweetener, belongs in a healthy diet. Not dialed back, not scaled back, no amount. Well, they also at the same time classify allulose as a sugar molecule. So it's neither of the two. There's no ability to regulate. There's no need to regulate it, which puts us again in a very unique position. This is a big one for me, and I may go a little bit over, but this is important. Now, when I set out to build this company, it's basically because I was honoring a vow that I made when I was 10 years old. My dad was killed when I was 10 years old, and that thrust my family into extreme poverty. I spent most of my childhood not eating every day. And that was real. It's trauma that I still carry with me to this day. And because we were poor and I was small, I'm still small and weak, and this was the 1970s when little boys fought, I was getting mercilessly beaten every single day on my way home from school. I had no guidance. I had no hope. I had no help. I had nothing. And when I turned 16 years old, I started lifting weights and I started eating different foods, whatever we could afford. Back then, you could get rancid meat for 10 cents a pound. So I could eat rancid hamburger, or we would eat dandelion soup, and pasta was 3 pounds for $1 back then. I was eating those types of foods in order to put on strength and muscle so that I could defend things. Well, what happened was when I put on muscle and I started exercising, it wasn't just my physical stature that changed. It was everything in my life that changed. My mentality changed, my psyche changed, my ambition changed, my desires changed, my reliance upon myself changed, the way I looked at people, the way people looked at me. For the first time, girls started looking at me because I was walking upright instead of looking at my shoes. Everything changed. It was a complete accident. I had no idea that would happen. I learned it the hard way, but I made a vow at that point. If I ever found a way to help people find a better quality of life, that I would jump. And that's what this company is. Jaca is the vehicle, because of its physiological benefits, that can help anybody or any family find a better way of life. And to that end, we put our money where our mouth is. We've got the Super Psych Lifestyle Enrichment Program. This is a podcast series that's a year old now. We've got about 50 out there, totally surrounding health and well-being. We've got functional medicine doctors like Dr. Wulfman, cardiovascular surgeons, Navy SEALs. We've got trainers, clinicians, and the list goes on. We don't want any money for it. There's no cost to subscribe. Go listen to the podcast and help people get healthy. Become a part of the Jaca community. Take it very seriously, that vow that I made. Additionally, we spent over a year creating health and well-being modules. Nutrition, lifestyle, mindset, and then a delta analysis to kind of bridge the gap between what you may be missing. All downloadable on the website, all for free. We want people to get healthy. We established a 501c3 called the Foundation for Nutritional Equality. This focuses on nutritional insecurity in America. 40 million Americans don't eat every day. 14 million children, like me, don't eat every day. 10% of our profits go into the foundation to help children find food. We're a pending B Corporation. We put purpose alongside profit. We build ESG into our corporate charter. We're going to make sure that we're helping people. We're not just peddling sugar. Hall's group just did a massive and beautiful 175-page due diligence analysis on our company, independent third party. One of the most formidable findings within their study, not mine, was that this approach to market is completely different than every other player out there, and it's absolutely necessary based upon consumer buying patterns. I didn't know that. That's fortuitous. I did it because I owe. But as it turns out, Deloitte did a big study on $1 trillion of buying power in this country, Gen Zs and millennials, and they found that 75% of the decision to buy a product across $1 trillion of buying power has nothing to do with the product itself. It's about ESG. It's about charitable outreach. It's about the founders behind the company. It's about doing right by people. That's what is compelling people to buy or not buy. And it just so happens we've been building the company this way anyway. So it's a happiness problem for us. Takes a village. My business partner, Brad, and I have been building companies together for 35 years. We built those tech companies I referenced together. We were in real estate development together for 15 years. Now we're doing this. We know what each other's thinking. And it's a hell of a good time building the company with these guys, one of the smartest people I've ever met as well. We've got a world-class advisory board. Dr. Rona Applebaum is the first ever chief science officer at Coca-Cola. Dr. Tom Oran invented craisins for Ocean Spray. John Crane went to Southeast Asia about 30 years ago and built the Southeast Asian base of operations for JP Morgan. He's a Wharton guy, helps us with our finances. So we've got a really stout board and a killer team that's making sure that we build this thing properly out of respect and out of honor for not just people, but for the ingredient. We're raising $5 million at a $20 million valuation. This is our third round, our Series A. This is our first post-launch round, and the round has just begun. 67% of our use of funds goes towards advertising. So again, infrastructure first. We spent the last year stabilizing KPIs. We built out the engines, built out the back office. I could scale to 10 million products tomorrow, and my supply chain and my company internally and outwardly facing would be able to handle it. Now it's time to throw fuel. I call it an F1 engine. I spent a year building this F1 engine. Now I'm going to throw 67% of 5 million into this thing as fuel in order to go turbo. That includes mainstream advertising. We're going back to television advertising, streaming channel television advertising. We saw what happened with Howie, but from a statistical standpoint, the customer acquisition cost in that environment has stayed relatively flat. People are still watching TV. They're still listening to commercials, even if they're looking at their phone during them, and the customer acquisition cost is relatively flat. By the same token, customer acquisition cost in the social media world, because of the advent of AI, is up 263% in the past couple of years. So what's happening at a base level, you used to put $1 million into ad spend. You had reliable KPIs. You could generate $3 million in revenue. That was a linear formula that worked. Well, now, because Instagram Reels are getting 200 billion views a day, you put in $1 million in ad spend, the KPIs are on their head, you generate $800,000 of revenue. That's getting worse. So while we will still leverage social media advertising to feed our AI engines, and it's still a great way to talk to people, we're going to 15x that spend. We're also going to go to mainstream television in order to become the Kleenex of the allulose market. And this is the last thing I'll say. There are 1 million sucraloses out there, but everybody knows Splenda, the yellow packet, because they built the brand right. There are 1 million aspartames out there, but everybody knows Equal, the blue packet, because they built the brand right. There are 1 million saccharins out there, but everybody knows Sweet and Low, the pink packet, because they built the brand right. There's no category killer, thought leader, dominant brand for allulose at all. There are no mainstream TV commercials. There's nothing but a click. And our job is to take over this market before anyone even knows it exists. That's the vision. Thank you.
Good presentation, Pete. We have time for a few questions. If anybody in the audience has a question, please raise your hand and we'll give you a chance to ask that. While people are coming to that, my question is, you have patents filed. What were the claims on the patents, and what moat do you think they'll provide you?
That's a great question. Again, we take ESG very seriously, environmental sustainability, because we're a pending B Corp. And so we spent a good bit of time doing research to file a provisional patent to manufacture allulose. And it obviously has to be novel and innovative to get a patent granted, even provisional. We've got a 92% chance of having that full patent granted to us. The big thing with it is the decrease in byproduct and waste. Our process decreases byproduct by 25x the leading manufacturer of allulose in the world, Tate & Lyle out of Europe. So we've got the ability to protect the environment, extract allulose properly, monetize it, manufacturing IP, which would go into an acquisition multiple. And really that's something that's a big or little blip on our radar screen, depending upon the funding partner, depending upon the strategic partner. I talked to a lot of banks out there, and some of these investment banks are, you can tell their schema, you can tell their central thesis. Some of them are like, you absolutely have to have manufacturing. You need to control the supply chain. You can't be successful without it. Okay, we're doing manufacturing. We've got a patent. I talked to other banks. They're like, forget about manufacturing. You don't want any part of it. Some of the biggest companies in the world, distributors, it just becomes a pain and it's cost intensive. Don't do it. Okay. So it really is going to be a function probably in our next round, our Series B, of that $30 million strategic partner, whether we actually go into manufacturing or not. We may not need to.
Great. We have a question from Magnus. Magnus, what is your question?
There are other producers and distributors of allulose, like iHerb and Nine Life, I think it's called. What are if you compare the other companies with your Jaca company, then or what are the competitive advantages with Jaca?
Incredibly important question because all alluloses are not the same. When we started this business a few years ago, we spent almost 6 months studying, vetting 30 suppliers of allulose out of Southeast Asia and Asia and Europe. 30. We had a heavily weighted QA formula that we put together. Everything from mouthy feel to color to texture to molecular analysis. Whatever was everything on the COA actually found at a molecular level upon testing. Heavily weighted QA. Analyzed 30, disqualified 26. We landed on 4. So we've got 4 supplier agreements. It gives us redundancy at the top of the supply chain. It gives me access to tens of thousands of metric tons. Fluffy, white, snowy, beautiful, good tasting product. There are some out there, in particular, there's a brand out there where it's actually yellow and it feels gummy in your fingers and it tastes like chapstick. There's another one out there that claims to be organic, but when you put it on your tongue, it stings your tongue. We've all been around for a minute, everybody on this phone. None of us have ever had an organic product that stings your tongue. So you've really got to let the buyer beware in this instance. And we spent exhaustive time and money and resources in order to ensure that we were providing 100% pure allulose, that it's top of the food chain, no pun, and that we have the ability to get enough of it where the consumer will never be out of stock. So again, there's no category leader. There's no dominant brand. Our vision is to become the Splenda of allulose.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Great. Any other questions in the room? With that, I think we're at the end of our time. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up at this point. We will make the recording available to those in the audience. Please let us know. We would like to thank Dr. Jeff Wulfman for a great presentation and Pete Ferrari also for a great presentation here today. We'll make the materials available to everyone. And with that, Pete, did you have any final closing words?
I just want to thank everybody for their time. I really appreciate you putting this together, Hall and Sam. Great job. And my pleasure to provide more information if anybody has interest.
Great. And Dr. Wulfman, any closing thoughts there?
It's really important. It's just really important.
Well
Amen,
said.
brother.
Well
I
said.
mean, it just like for the kids, for the families, for the even the financial ability of governments to do the burden is so high. Like this is really, really important, and I've been waiting for something that is meaningfully an option that will work well for a long time.
Great. Well said there. I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us today and looking forward to seeing you guys again soon. With that, we'll go ahead and close it for now, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Nice to meet you.
Bye-bye.